Welcome to Haunted Midnight. Today, I will be reading you 3 true creepy night shift horror stories. Before we get started, it would really help me if you subscribe if you haven't already. We're almost at our goal of 100 subscribers, and this would really help me. Thank you. I never believed in ghosts or the paranormal until I took the security guard job at the old abandoned hospital on the edge of town. I thought ghosts were just figments of overactive imaginations, stories people told around campfires. But the things I experienced during those long, quiet nights changed my mind real quick. The hospital had been closed down for nearly a decade when I started. Something about contaminated water making patients sick. All the equipment was left to rot inside. I did rounds through echoing corridors, shined my flashlight on dusty gurneys and operating tables. The place always gave me the creeps. It just felt wrong, like a malice hung in the stagnant air. On my first night, I stayed holed up in the little security office watching the staticky CCTV monitors. The hospital was totally silent on the grainy screens. Near dawn, I finally drifted off. That's when the noises started. Footsteps, soft and rhythmic, outside in the hall. I jolted awake, expecting to see a wayward homeless man on the monitor. Nothing. The footsteps continued, steady and deliberate, moving away down the corridor. I sat paralyzed, listening until they faded away. The next night I convinced myself it was just a vivid dream. But soon after I settled into the office, the footsteps returned. This time accompanied by a scraping, like furniture being dragged across a tile floor. I forced myself to check the hallway. Of course, nothing was there. The hospital remained still and empty, exactly as I'd left it. Uneasy, I locked myself in the office until morning. Over the next week, the occurrences multiplied. I hear crashing in remote hallways, like metal instruments being flung to the floor. Strange voices echoed through the building, soft wailing, angry shouting, mournful crying. Sometimes just formless moans of pain. I started dreading each shift, but I needed the work too badly to quit. The atmosphere in the hospital shifted at night. Shadows took on unnatural shapes and sizes. Sometimes I'd turn a corner, and the temperature would drop 10 degrees in an instant. The hair on my arms prickled with static. The place felt haunted. Then I started seeing them. Wispy silhouettes drifting past open doorways. Phantom faces staring out from darkened rooms. A little girl in an old-fashioned dress endlessly roaming the pediatrics wing. But the worst was a hulking, shapeless mass that lurked in the narrow maintenance corridors behind the walls. It oozed dense shadows and a primordial sense of dread. I avoided those passageways entirely after catching a glimpse of something reaching for me from the inky darkness. The final straw came a few weeks in. I was walking past an empty patient room when the door slammed shut in front of me. Boom, just like that. Then came a blood-curdling scream from inside, like someone was being murdered with a rusty knife. I scrambled back so fast I fell. The horrific shrieking went on and on before cutting off abruptly. I pulled myself up and sprinted for the exit, radioing the supervisor that I'd never be back. Whatever evil called that hospital home could keep it. I tore off into the night and didn't slow down until I was a mile away. Didn't even stop to grab my jacket. Since then, I've avoided the place like the plague. Found a nice boring job stocking shelves at the grocery store. The paranormal occurrences messed me up for a while though. I couldn't sleep, imagining sounds in the darkness. Kept checking over my shoulder as I walked around town after dark. But the visions faded in time. I convinced myself it was just lack of sleep and an overactive mind playing tricks. Easier to rationalize than the alternative. But deep down I know the truth. There are forces beyond our understanding in the world. The abandoned hospital is oozing with them. On those quiet nights, when I lie awake peering into shadows, I can still hear the distant footsteps pacing up and down empty hallways, steadily, patiently, reminding me some places are better left forgotten. Working the overnight shift at Wilson's Corner Store for the past 3 years has been uneventful, almost peaceful. But over the last few weeks, strange things have started happening that make me question my sanity. It began with small objects mysteriously changing positions. A stray candy bar in the wrong aisle. Cans turned the wrong way on the shelf. I wrote it off as absent-mindedness. But soon entire displays were rearranged overnight in haphazard fashion. All the breads and pastries jumbled together on the shelves. The motor oil and automotive accessories scattered across the floor. Surely I couldn't be this forgetful. I decided to review the security footage from the new system we had installed last month. That's when things took a truly bizarre turn. The grainy footage from Tuesday night initially showed nothing out of the ordinary. I watched myself on the black and white screen stocking shelves and mopping floors, alone in the empty store, but just after 3 a.m., a dark shadow darted across the back wall so fast I almost missed it. I rewound and watched again, heart racing. There was clearly a human-shaped silhouette moving of its own accord, but I had been alone in a locked store all night. I continued viewing the tape. Over the next hour, the shadow sporadically crept across the back room, down the aisles behind the counter. It seemed to manifest from the darkness within the store, with no apparent source. I skipped ahead to dawn when the morning manager arrived to relieve me, but saw no more activity. Who would believe this footage showed something supernatural was stalking me every night in an empty convenience store? But I knew I wasn't crazy. I resolved to get proof the next evening that this was not my imagination. When Wednesday's overnight shift started, I locked myself in and monitored the new cameras closely. The shadow did not disappoint. Materializing once again around 2:30 a.m. this time, I first caught it slithering across the floor in the back room on the monitor. I agreed to check in person, but nothing seemed to miss in the storeroom. Yet when I walked back onto the sales floor, the hair on my arms stood up. Something felt off. My own shadow cast by the dim overhead lights seemed to move independently, shifting and distorting grotesquely as I stood frozen. I waved my arm and watched my shadow waver, then transform into an unnatural crooked shape against the wall. Pure instinct told me I needed to escape the sinister presence lurking within this darkness. I fumbled to the back room, slamming the door and locking it with trembling hands. But in the shadows beyond the door came ominous sounds, skittering, scratching noises like long nails, dragging across the metal door. Terror seized me. Was the entity trying to get in as I cowered helplessly? All night I remained barricaded in that cramped office, trying to keep my sanity as the eerie sounds continued outside the door. I flicked the light switch repeatedly to remind myself I was alone and awake, not trapped in some nightmare. Only the rising sun finally allowed me to flee outside unharmed. But the lurking shadow presence seems to have grown bolder, no longer content to simply move objects around at night. The activity has escalated, as if the entity is gaining power. Last night when I arrived for my shift, I immediately sensed a heavy atmosphere hanging over the entire store. As I hesitantly walked the aisles, things only got stranger. Cold, sudden breezes kept blowing papers off the counter, no matter how many times I restacked them. The normally noisy refrigerator fans were dead silent. All the lights flickered in unison, every few minutes, even after I checked the circuit breakers. It felt like the entire building was holding its breath, bracing for something sinister. Just before dawn, all the lights cut out abruptly and remained out. Pure darkness engulfed everything and seemed to swallow all sound. I froze in place, listening intently but hearing nothing, not even the sounds of my own body. No breaths, no heartbeat, no rustling clothes, only dead silence. Panic rose in my throat. I told myself to move, to run to get out. But my limbs would not respond, like my body was no longer mine to control. A creeping coldness seeped through me. Then came the whisper. From the blackness itself, unintelligible but unmistakable. Hissing syllables in some ancient language, uttered directly into my mind. I wanted to scream but could not summon my voice. As suddenly as they had cut out, the lights came back on. I stumbled for the exit, the whole way hearing that cryptic whisper echoing in my mind. Even now, days later, it haunts me, though I cannot grasp its meaning. Nor can I unsee what was revealed in those darkened moments. My own shadow standing utterly still, unchanged by the restored lights. A shadow with no body to cast it. I dared not return to that store after my final graveyard shift ended. Let someone else be the nightly companion to the unseen forces inhabiting that place once the lights go out. The shadows there thrive after dark, hungry for souls to terrorize. I will not tempt that evil again. I started working the night shift as a janitor to earn some extra cash during college. The job was at a big old church on the edge of town. It had been around for over a century. With its creaky floors, huge stained glass windows, and musty basement, the place always gave me the creeps. But the flexible hours and quiet atmosphere seemed ideal for a college student. My first few months were routine and uneventful. I'd arrive at 11 p.m., prop open the heavy front doors, and spend the next 6 hours sweeping, mopping, emptying trash cans, and straightening up from whatever events had taken place there earlier. I try to focus on my work and not get spooked by all the eerie noises that come with being alone at night in a big empty building. I listen to music or podcasts on my headphones to distract myself. But one night around 2 a.m., I was up cleaning the balcony pews when I suddenly heard a disjointed series of loud, jarring notes coming from the ancient piano in the choir loft below. I ripped my earbuds out, startled by the abrupt noise slicing through the silence. That piano was decrepit and horribly out of tune. Most of the keys no longer worked. As far as I knew, it was unplayable, which was why the church had relegated it to a dusty corner of the attic years before. Yet the chaotic plinking of keys continued echoing through the sanctuary. I felt goosebumps break out across my arms as I listened closely. Was someone up there in the attic? Had a homeless person broken in and was messing around up there? I slowly crossed the balcony and climbed the rickety staircase leading up to the attic. Each creak of the old wood made my heart pound faster. At the top, I quickly flipped on a light and squinted into the gloom. "Hello," I called out anxiously. Only silence answered. I crept toward the piano, looking nervously around for any sign of an intruder. But the attic was still and undisturbed, covered in a thick layer of dust. The weird playing had stopped. Up close, the piano looked even more broken down and unplayable than before. Clearly, no one could have been up here making music on those ruined keys. Uneasy, I retreated back downstairs to finish up my work, but I kept glancing up at the attic, unable to shake the creepy feeling that had settled over me. That place was haunted. About an hour later, I had just taken the trash out to the bins behind the building when I heard a tremendous crash come from the basement inside. I froze, listening hard down the stone steps that led to the basement door. After a few minutes of silence, I cautiously opened the door and peered into the inky darkness below. "Hello? Is someone there?" No response. My nerves completely frayed. I rushed to finish up and get out of there as fast as I could. Driving home as the sky lightened with dawn, I replayed the bizarre events over and over. I tried to rationalize them, faulty pipes, someone playing a prank. But deep down I knew there was no logical explanation. I felt rattled to my core. The next night, I sat parked outside the church for several minutes, working up the nerve to go inside. I kept glancing up at the dark attic windows, half expecting to see a ghostly face staring back down at me. Finally, I steeled myself and went in, moving cautiously through the fellowship hall as I vacuumed. Suddenly, I heard the distinct sound of heavy footsteps overhead, like someone pacing back and forth across the attic. I quickly shut off the vacuum and listened closely. The irregular footsteps continued, moving from one side of the attic to the other. There was absolutely no normal reason for what I was hearing. I finished up in record time, constantly peering into dark corners and jumping at every small creak or groan of the old building. I knew then that I couldn't come back here alone again. This place was haunted, no question about it. I consulted with the older lady who worked Sunday mornings. When I told her about the bizarre occurrences, she just nodded knowingly. "Oh yeah, this place has its fair share of spirits roaming around. You'll get used to it. Get used to it. No thanks, I quit on the spot." I still think back now and then to my brief stint working nights in that church. While it makes for a crazy story at parties, being alone there after dark genuinely terrified me. The piano playing itself, the unexplained crashing in the basement, the phantom footsteps pacing overhead. It was all so unnerving and inexplicable. I only spent a few nights there, but the chilling events of those evenings will stick with me forever. Whenever I drive past that looming old building now, I quicken my pace, glancing up at the attic windows and wondering if the ghosts within are still carrying on their frightening nightly rituals, lying in wait for the next unsuspecting person. If you enjoy these stories, share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you had similar encounters, please share your experiences too. Thank you for watching, and please like and subscribe as it supports me a lot.